The last step in our setup involves updating the firmware on your EV3. By updating the firmware, you ensure that your EV3 is reset to the latest LEGO standard. I'll let you in on a secret. Most firmware updates and software updates are not the addition of new features, but rather are simply fixes to any errors that the manufacturer discovered after releasing the product. Even if you have a brand new EV3, you don't want to skip this step, since the firmware that was installed in the factory may not be the most up-to-date version today. Remember, you get the same EV3 brick whether you buy the educational version or the home version of the kit, but the firmware update happens from the software. Since the two versions of the software differ a little, I've made two different videos that show you how to update your firmware depending on which software you own. In this video, I'll cover the firmware update for the home software. If you have the educational software, you should skip this video and instead watch the one specifically for the educational edition. Before you can update your EV3's firmware, start up the EV3 software on your computer, turn on your EV3, and connect your EV3 to your computer using the USB cable. Updating the firmware on your EV3 essentially resets your EV3 back to the original settings that LEGO intended, and it's a good idea to do so before you continue with the rest of this course. However, I do need to warn you that this firmware update will delete anything personal that's already on your EV3, like programs or special sounds somebody may have downloaded, and so on. Generally, people save copies of all of this stuff on the computer, so it's not a problem. But if you're using an EV3 that someone else has used before, you should know that anything they put on will be erased. When you start the software, you may get a message telling you to do a firmware update. If so, just click OK to make that message go away. Even if you didn't get the message, like I didn't hear, you should still continue with the update. Now, the first thing I always do with this home edition, because these sounds really annoy me, is I click on this little speaker up here, and that makes it nice and quiet, which is wonderful. So now what you need to do is go to the Tools menu and click on Firmware Update. And up here where it says Online Updates, we're just going to check. So click on Check. And you'll find a link to the new firmware. And just click on the Download button here. And I'm on a Mac, it just downloads it into my Downloads folder. If you're on a PC, it may ask you where you want to save it, but I can see the download is almost complete up here. And once that download is complete, you go back to your software. And now you need to browse and find your new update. If you click on Browse, it'll take you to wherever it stores the firmware, which is not where I put the new update. So I'm going to go to Downloads. And right here is the file I just downloaded, so I'll say Open. And now you can see the new firmware download name, which is a bit weird, is up here, and it's in Users K Downloads. And so now we can just click the Download button. At this point, you just have to sit back and wait for a few minutes while the EV3 updates. If you look at your EV3 screen, the brick should just say Updating. Meanwhile, as you watch your computer screen, you'll see the progress bar moving very, very slowly. The whole process can take several minutes to complete. Thanks to the magic of film, I've sped it up significantly here, but just sit back and have some patience. But eventually, you should see this Firmware Update Successful box. And you can just click on OK, and then on the firmware update you can click on Close. There's not a lot that can go wrong with this step, as long as you just sit back and wait. Just be sure not to shut anything down while it's happening. If you find yourself waiting several minutes with absolutely no change in the progress bar on the screen, give it another few minutes. If you're still stuck, you should probably go ahead and call LEGO support. I'm hoping that all of the setup has gone pretty smoothly for you and you've made it successfully to this point. Congratulate yourself on everything you've done so far. It really does take some time and effort to do all this setup. Now you're finally ready for the really fun part, because in the next classes, we'll actually start learning about using the EV3 and finally get to program a robot. See you soon.